We have two stories in today's video. The first one will be from Verizon and the second one from T-Mobile. And this one here in particularly, I'm going to make sure that I go ahead and link both articles in the description. If you didn't move to Florida recently, you probably moved to Texas. So we just covered the story on the whole Florida situation. Huge influx of movers, transplants going over to the wonderful state of Florida. With all the pandemic movement, they've experienced an enormous amount of network strain and they've invested accordingly to deal with it. And here it is. We got a second state being mentioned, Texas. Hundreds of thousands of its customers decamped for Texas, especially one city. All right, let's see what it is. You guys can see they've got pictures of, different types of small cells and, all these different access points here. And it says Houston. Let's see if that's what this is about. All right, so the pandemic related influx of people dating all the way back to January 20th. And this appears to be the Austin area being the fastest growing by far, according to Verizon Wireless. Texas has been the number 2 destination state behind Florida since early 2020. Verizon said with more than 200,000 customers moving to the Lone Star State. Florida gained 250,000. All right, so 200,000 to Texas and 250,000 to Florida. And it is not an even distribution. And that makes it more difficult because if it's even distribution, then you can just focus those upgrades to those specific areas. But here it says Austin has a 323% increase in data traffic since the start of the pandemic. Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio have only seen 74 to 84% increases. I would assume, just based on the millimeter wave build, the small cell build, and just general network upgrades, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio probably have been able to weather that storm. That's not much. The 323% in Austin is probably a real issue. That's no small percentage. So, what are people doing in these places now to cause this type of increase? Well, you have a large influx of people that are probably using a lot of video intensive data services, more FaceTime, more video calls, more Zooming. I would assume also there's probably a lot more just streaming, people that are consuming high resolution video playback, whether it's like, in the instance of being on ultra wideband or if it's on the LT network, there's going to be stress. In this particular instance, Verizon's first 5G cities, one of them was Houston, and that allows them to kind of be on the, I guess, ahead of the curve because they probably have built a bunch of small cells, probably already put in for, permits to get upgrades going. So they've probably been able to deal with it a little bit better. The Austin situation is a little bit different. I would assume that they are now probably getting punched in the face in terms of the network engineering team there, where they just didn't see this coming, had no idea what was going on, and then they probably looked at data from several weeks and then moving into the months in 2000 and 2021 and thinking, what is going on here in Austin? And they've had to respond accordingly. I'm sure things are starting to improve now because they've had like a year and a half to when they first probably started to notice the trend. But this probably was rough. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are still pockets of Austin that are dealing with congestion. If you're from these Texas areas, these regions and cities, Austin specifically, let me know how things have been going, if you're seeing improvements, and if you notice the slowdowns over the last couple of years. All right, this next story, T-Mobile US throws down 5G gauntlet to slow-moving rivals. This is, I believe, Ian Morris, and this is lightreading.com, link in the description. All right, so there's this big 5G event thing going on, and Neville Ray, the president of technology at T-Mobile, was speaking to T-Mobile's strength and position within the 5G marketplace, specifically extending their 5G midband coverage from 225 million pops most recently, with the goal by the end of the year to be at 260 million pops. That would be a very sizable increase. It's really hard, to approach the, 300, 315, 325 million pops coverage, especially with something like midband, which is not low band, right? So you don't get the same range and the footprint to cover is much more challenging. But they're going to shoot for it. and they're saying that they're going to get it soon. We'll be tracking that through the rest of the year. And in the effort to do that, T-Mobile has indicated that it is projecting a peak capital expenditure this year where they're going to be spending probably the most money they ever will. They probably will never spend this much ever again in an annual capex. 10.9 billion in 2021, up from 9.8 billion the year before. So they have increased their capex, and this year the capex is estimated to reach 13.2 to 13.5 billion. That's key. This puts them a lot closer to, say, for example, Verizon, who is going to spend somewhere between like 18 and 18.5 billion. I think AT&T spends the most. They're probably approaching 23 or 24 billion. But Verizon and AT&T invest in fiber, which T-Mobile does not. So the capex can be a little bit different where they allocate those dollars. And I think at this point, when you look at this capex, and this is something to speak to here, their capex has increased, and 20-30% is no joke. That's big time for T-Mobile, and this obviously has to be done in order for them to remain the leader in 5G, because Verizon is here. They have spectrum. AT&T is building fast. At least in my market, I could speak to it, and that's going to be scaling throughout the year. And if they want to be the leaders as they claim they are, this spending, it I don't know. I don't know if this is sustainable. If if they only do this for 1 year and they think that somehow, some way, it means like their job is complete, I think this is where they're going to be in trouble if they're trying to be a leader compared to Verizon and AT&T, because Verizon and AT&T are likely going to keep their capexes up for another year or two, and then they'll start to taper theirs off. Meanwhile, I think it's all tapering from here for T-Mobile. But T-Mobile is ahead 2 years in building out their mid-band 5G network. But we'll see how they go with their pops, because that might be explaining why they're reducing their capex, because they feel they're ahead and they don't need to spend all that money, obviously. But with the expenditures, they've got these synergies with the merger. The Sprint holdings, the licenses, puts them in a position to create a lot of capacity. Maybe they could focus on some small cells. Maybe they could build some new sites in rural America to shore up the coverage. There still is a coverage gap between T-Mobile and AT&T. There still is a coverage gap between T-Mobile and Verizon. And they could probably do some things with the back systems to make their routing better. Who knows? Maybe they've got plans to do something with fiber. I know a lot of people have their doubts, but it would make them a better carrier. And I think they would be wise to maybe start investing in some kind of assets to improve their backhaul situation. But at these types of investor conferences, sometimes we get a little bit of insight from people like Neville Ray and the company. And here, I think the most important takeaway is that they are spending big this year. They are looking to increase their, million pop count. As this year, I mean, Verizon and AT&T are bringing the heat. You're going to see those guys really closing the gap in mid-band 5G build. And T-Mobile doesn't want to just give up their position. And T-Mobile definitely wants to create capacity because they're doing fixed wireless access home. They're doing 5G home, and they're selling, home internet through the cellular network. And so is Verizon, right? So there's all this competition now. We can definitely say that after a couple years since the merger, this version of T-Mobile is the best version of T-Mobile we've seen as a competitor. And we've never seen AT&T and Verizon actually work, playing from behind relative to this build. But I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. Do you guys see this title and say, yeah, um, Verizon and AT&T are slow moving? I don't see them as slow moving, at least not in my market, in my state. I still think, T-Mobile could shore up their coverage a little bit. They could create some more uniform capacity as opposed to building speed islands. I do hope over the rest of the year, I start to see more T-Mobile upgrades, because it's been about 6 months and I haven't really seen new 5G UC sites for T-Mobile. It's been pretty quiet. It's been a few here and there, but it got real hot for like 6 months and then it slowed down. So I want to see them complete that. I'd say the 5G UC is on probably 40% of the sites here. I'd like to see that number jump up by 50%, maybe get on at least 2/3 of the sites to really create a more uniform capacity build. I have a feeling by the end of this year, that's where Verizon is going to be. And I would say probably mid to late Q1 next year, that's where AT&T is going to be. So T-Mobile can't rest on their laurels, and they got to continue to push to retain and hold on to their 5G leadership. And then don't forget to tell me what you guys think about this Verizon story with Florida and now Texas with all those transplants. Love to hear what you guys have to say. You are the voice of the people of the SMT Nation. Let your voice be heard. Please do like, share, and subscribe for more. And turn on that bell notification icon so you never miss an upload. Links in the description for my Twitter, email, and my Patreon page if you want to support us and get early access to content and exclusives not found anywhere else. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one. Peace.